Charis Loke is an editorial artist whose passion for art keeps her moving homes within Malaysia in order to pursue the best work opportunities. Her love and deep knowledge of her culture and history is what landed her projects with clients such as Netflix. Want to know how? Then join us today as we talk about how to build a solid editorial portfolio, tips on how to choose better clients, and a geek out about inking with pen nibs versus brushes. Hi, I'm Anya, and this is Make More Art, a podcast by Etcher, meant to inspire you to keep on creating. Now let's hear from our guest. Charis, please tell us, how did you get to be where you're at today? What's your whole story since first you discovered art was a thing you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, I think probably my earliest memory of, liking art was as a really small kid. Apparently, I would sit in a corner and just like tear tissue paper the whole day. So maybe that's where my artistic expression started. And I've always loved drawing. Like I would draw all through middle school and high school. But then when it was time to go to university, I actually went to do a science degree.
Okay.
So I'm trained as a scientist. And then after that, when I finished, I became a teacher and I was teaching English for a while. So I've never had formal art training. Like a lot of it was just learning on my own, reading books, looking at tutorials online, and just like practicing and learning through trial and error. Until eventually, when I stopped teaching, and I said, okay, maybe it's time to try doing this full-time freelance. So I think I've been freelancing for about 4 to 5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say that's pretty much the amount of time it's taken to feel comfortable doing this as a full-time sort of career.
So when did you make the switch you started freelance as you were, teaching?
Yeah, so I was doing some jobs on the side
Okay.
while I was still teaching full-time. And then eventually it got to a point where I decided, okay, I think I've built up enough of a awareness of the industry and enough contacts and networks to be able to stop and do this full time.
Okay, and before I ask you more questions about how that happened, so was there like a little part of you that really wanted to do art, but you just kept it locked away in a cage? Was that it?
I don't think I would say that. I mean, I've kind of always been doing it as a side hobby, but I feel like I also have a lot of other interests and things that I wanted to explore. So it's always been this kind of juggling between like, well, I want to do art, but I also want to do this. And I also think it's important to explore these other things.
And why did art win from all the hobbies you had? Why did you pick art?
I think it's just because, I mean, I enjoy reading and like listening to stories, and art is basically just telling stories.
Sure.
And especially in the fields that I work in, which is predominantly publishing and editorial, that means I get to read manuscripts and like articles way earlier than anyone else. So in a way, it's kind of my secret plan to get into art as a way to like read more stories.
Oh, that is smart. Okay, so you were teaching full time, started doing some art on the side. How long did it take you to go from, artist part time to art full time?
Well, I think I would say I started doing it part time for about 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
But you also have to remember I've also been drawing ever since like high school, so it's always been a consistent kind of practice. The part-time thing where I started to learn, this is how you do freelance work, this is how you handle jobs and talk to clients and do things like contracts and invoicing. So I think that part-time was about 2 to 3 years. And then after that, I went full-time.
And how did you get all the information you needed? Because there are so many artists who want to learn exactly that, how to make connections and, how to get into the publishing industry. How did you do it? How did that go for you?
So I think it depends also on which which part of the publishing industry you're trying to work in, because editorial is very different from, let's say, like fantasy or sci-fi book publishing. A lot of the art business stuff that I picked up was from reading blogs, so blogs like Muddy Colors, and then Dear Art Director, which is a Tumblr where art directors actually answer questions that are sent in.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and just like reading a really wide variety of blogs that have been going on, I think, for the past decade or so.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, you've been doing a lot of homework for a long time before you, and then you tested the waters, and then you jumped in. Okay. Actually, you did not jump in. You were slowly getting into the depths of the pool. Very, very, very wise. And so I was looking through your work, and I saw that you have really big clients such as Netflix, and you have a very varied array of art mediums that you explore. But it felt to me like you had a very special affinity with ink. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So I started using ink. I think when I was in college, that's where I discovered things like the ink nibs, so crow-quill nibs. And then, I mean, since then, I've moved on to using brushes compared to nibs.
Why?
But I think I like ink. It's a bit more expressive, I think, the way that I use it. And you can get a lot more texture out of a brush stroke than you can with most nibs.
Okay, yeah, I have a particular curiosity for this because I'm also exploring a lot of ink, and I'm trying to figure out if I like brushes more than I like nibs. And I know that you have, dips with like a very specific width, and then you have the flex nibs that allow you to have more, variety to your strokes, which I like better than the other nibs. And I know I'm getting a little bit specific on technical stuff. I'm sorry, it's too early for my English to start into full bloom. But can you give us a little bit more details about the difference between brushes and nibs, and what are your favorites? Just so for people like me who are trying to explore inks more, so we know where to start.
Yeah, I think it also depends, like what kind of lines you enjoy making, right? Like you said, there are nibs with fixed width, so if you like very clean uniform lines, things like that might be better. Like flex nibs, once you learn to control them, you can get really nice lines that, like especially for curves where you start out really thin and then you can get thicker along the way. I think for me personally, the thing about brushes is because you can control how much ink is on the brush. So like drier strokes, you can actually see the hairs of the brush kind of like leaving trails behind. And that's something that nibs can't really do to the same extent.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to, because every time I cannot control the amount of ink that goes into my flex nibs, and sometimes it leaves a big blob where I want it to be like sparser, and then the whole drawing is ruined, and I get so sad. So yeah, should explore more brushes. Any recommendations on brushes? What do you enjoy?
I don't even know what the brand name is, honestly, because I use Chinese calligraphy brushes.
Calligraphy brushes.
So yeah, I mean, there's different types. I think the ones that I have might be horsehair. I'm not super sure. So they're not too soft, but they're also not too hard.
Okay, so you use not vegan brushes. You use specific brushes with specific animal hair?
The ones that I've been using, yeah, but I also have synthetic brushes for like different things.
Okay, good, because I was curious to understand how different kinds of brushes would give you different results with ink, because I know some are better than others, so I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Okay, cool. Sorry, it was like a little bit of a rant about brushes, but I really wanted to know, because ever since I saw your work, I'm like, I need to get more information from her. Sorry, so let's pick up where we left off. Okay, so affinity with ink, you prefer brushes to nibs, and yes, so you started exploring ink in college, right?
Yep. So I think it's been about 7 to 8 years since then, pretty much.
And what other mediums did you explore that you enjoyed as much, or tell us a little bit about your medium travel and journey through the time?
Sure. So I think around the same time in college, I also started picking up digital art, so like learning how to draw with a tablet. And I think for me, I like it a lot because it's so easy to make changes, right? Especially when you're working on commercial jobs with clients and you need to show them different options. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot faster and easier to just go through a few different color variations digitally than to have to paint every single
Yeah.
different color thumbnail. And I think because I've also always been on the move like every few years,
Mm-hmm.
so working digitally means it's a lot easier to just carry the whole setup, like just take your tablet and laptop, and you can work almost wherever.
Yeah.
Whereas if I had to rely a lot more on traditional materials, I would need to have like a proper working space and studio every time I moved.
That is true. Why are you moving every few years?
Because like I said, I have a lot of different interests, so I tend to like move around for different jobs here and there.
Oh. So like
Yeah.
illustration jobs that make you move, is that it?
But also other jobs. So like right now, I'm a comics editor at this journalism kind of platform,
Mm-hmm.
and I also work with an arts and culture non-profit, which is more education based. So we kind of teach art workshops at like heritage sites and that sort of thing. So that's actually why I moved over to Georgetown, where I live right now.
Wow. So you've been just all of your moves have been within the country, or do you also go?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been exploring a lot, like a big part of Malaysia.
Well, mostly the west side of Malaysia, not the eastern side.
Yeah, I'm curious because you are a part of our artist for the book that we're making at Etcher Lab, and the city that you're depicting is where you're living currently. It's Georgetown
Yep.
in Georgetown, Penang, right?
Yeah, in Penang.
Penang accents. I'm sorry, I did not mean to butcher.
No worries.
In Penang. So, why did you choose Georgetown and not other cities that you've been living in?
Okay, I mean, this is pretty easy because the non-profit that I'm working with, like the arts
Mm-hmm.
and culture non-profit, like this is where they are based. And they're also based here because of the heritage zone. So Georgetown, part of it is considered like a UNESCO World Heritage Area because of the history.
Mm-hmm.
So this non-profit has been based here for about 20 years, and we teach
Mm-hmm.
mostly like youth and school children about the local culture and heritage. So if I wanted to work with them, I definitely had to move over here. But definitely no regrets because it's such a great place to live in with all the culture and
Yeah,
stories.
you made me want to visit because the art that you chose that you made for the book, you taught me just with the art itself, you taught me a lot about your culture because it's very informative. Um, I mean, we have different artists in the book, and some artists like to talk about their favorite places to eat or where they like to walk. You gave us a full-on heritage. It was amazing. It is amazing. By the way, folks, if you want to learn more about the book, just head over to etterlab.com/book. We will be updating that link with information as we go. But yeah, it's interesting to me that it is true. You are a storyteller, so your pieces have so much history in them, and not just a book. Like the other art you do that I see in your website, in your Instagram feed, it's very story based. So why I know we talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious to know why is that so important to you and what would you like to leave after you're gone? I mean, art is like a testament that we leave behind even after we're gone, our pieces remain. And I would like to know your thoughts about that and why does history and storytelling matter so much to you?
Yeah, I think it's because I mean I grew up reading a lot of fantasy books, watching a lot of sci-fi fantasy movies, and the thing that I began to notice after a while is like most of these stories are from like either America or Europe, right? So they're very I guess they're not stories from Southeast Asia. So you'll be reading books and watching films, and after a while you realize, I don't see anyone that kind of looks like me in this story. Um,
Yes.
and it's true that, we can empathize with all kinds of characters when it comes to stories. You don't have to be from that culture to be able to understand. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also true that, stories can be a really good kind of mirror to show people, like your this is your life, or this is someone else whose life is kind of similar to yours. They've gone through the same things, or they understand the same little quirks about your location or your country. So because one day my dad was just watching me drawing, and then he asked me, how come you only draw white people? And at the time, I was like, that's a weird question, but
Wow.
yeah, so I thought about it and I was like, it's true because I had been learning how to draw from, like all those anatomy books, like how to be an illustrator. And they were all written by, I don't know, either American artists or European artists. And naturally, the way they drew people would look a certain way. So then I started thinking about it and I was like, yeah, I mean, I have to be more conscious about who I'm drawing and like what I'm drawing, what kind
So
of
good.
stories am I choosing to tell. And definitely once I started working at the arts and culture nonprofit, like it helped a lot because in order to teach the kids about our local culture, I had to learn it myself first.
Yeah.
So I would be out in the town, like talking to people and kind of like learning firsthand about it. So in a way, that's a great example of how like my non-art interests have actually affected my artwork.
Wow. I find it very interesting that you say that because last week I just interviewed another artist for the book Edge. She's black and she told me pretty much the exact same story you're telling me, that she was always drawing white people and her mom was like, how come you only draw white people? Why are our people not represented in your art? And she made a conscious choice ever since then to draw only black people because that's, well, she has a limited time, then she wants to use it to portray what matters the most to her. And she explained this way more eloquently than I'm explaining right now. So if you guys are listening, just head over to her interview at editorial.com/edge. But yeah, it's mind blowing that you're telling me that because you had kind of the same experience. And so now I understand why your themes are so focused in your history and your people. And oh my God, this is so cool. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like I still enjoy all the stuff I grew up with. Like, I love Tolkien a lot. Like, I wouldn't mind drawing like Lord of the Rings characters the whole day because it's fun to me. But like H said, like we all have limited time. So also in terms of like the commercial jobs I accept, I will try to prioritize jobs where I guess I get to have a bit more input in like how I'm depicting the people. Because I've actually had a job before where they were like, hey, and this was for a story set in Singapore, like a very specific 1960s Singapore with like certain gangs, and then whatever sketches I sent them, they came back with the feedback, and they were like, could you make the characters look more universal? And I was just like,
what does that mean?
What does that mean?
And what did they mean with that, by the way? What did they want?
Actually, I feel like they didn't really know what they want, but that's a whole different story. Because I think one thing about stories is like the more specific a story is, like oddly enough, it's also more relatable. Because I think the stories that we kind of identify a lot with or we feel a lot of emotion for are stories that are rooted in someone's real life experience.
Yeah.
And the more kind of details you have in there, it actually helps people to get into the story better.
I agree. We're all humans. We're all the same. We all struggle through the same, roughly things. So we all empathize with each other. We're all the same. Okay, wonderful. Question, very, very fan-based question. Tell me the story of how you landed a job for Netflix.
Okay, so I think they were looking at a few different Malaysian illustrators to do it because the show that I got to do the murals for is called The Ghost Bride, and it's based on a novel by Yang Zi Chu, who is a Malaysian but living in the US now. And the story is also set in, I think, about the 1800s in a part of Malaysia, something like that. So they were looking for an illustrator to do the art for their local kind of marketing campaign. And so I think they found me by looking at my portfolio online and seeing the past work that I had done, which happens to be quite culturally specific, right? So they were like, okay, we know that this person will be able to kind of depict this show because it's also set in a very specific time period. So in terms of like the costuming and like the visual language, you kind of need to be able to do the research into that heritage. And
Wow.
interestingly, part of the show was actually filmed in Georgetown.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I went over to the building that they had filmed it in to take reference photos. So that's one of the perks of living here.
Yeah, so that this just means that the theme that you chose to focus on to give most of your energy towards just helped you land a really good job because they saw that's what you enjoy doing, that's what you're really good at. So this is really good advice. Any advice on building a portfolio?
I think because I also work with a lot of artists now in my role as an editor, so I commission editorial illustrations and like editorial comics. So for editorial, definitely, if you've never done it before but you want to build a portfolio, a really easy way to do it is to look for articles from publications that you like. So, like open up the New Yorker and find a nice article or whatever, or maybe even an article from the place that you're trying to pitch to or to send your portfolio to. And then just pretend that you've been given a brief to illustrate that article and then read it, come up with an illustration, and then that can go into your portfolio. So once you put together maybe 4 or 5 of those, like enough, you don't have to make a lot before you start sending your work out, but like enough to show that you can consistently be producing a certain level of work with a somewhat consistent kind of visual style. Because art directors need to know that if they commission you, they kind of need to know roughly what they're going to get. Like it's not great to have surprises in the middle where they think that, oh, we were commissioning you because you wanted this kind of style, and then you turn in something that looks completely different.
That's great
Because
advice.
yeah, there is room for experimentation, but that's where your personal work and personal pieces come in. Yeah, if you're on
Fake.
a job, maybe like not such a great idea to try
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah,
completely
yeah.
new.
Fake it till you make it. Once you make it, then just keep doing it, I guess. Wow. Um, and I wonder, so you had a very, very interesting career path. What would you consider that were your biggest artistic struggles?
I think definitely just the logistics and like the challenges of trying to juggle art alongside all those other things that I've been doing. Like besides the science research when I was a student, and then the teaching job, and then the job at the arts and culture nonprofit, and now my editing work alongside all of this. And like something that I'm still kind of trying to figure out and learn is how to prioritize things, and how to be a lot more selective about like what kind of illustration work I'm going to do. What am I going to say yes to? What am I going to say no to?
And what usually, so what have you discovered so far? What do you say yes to and no to?
I think it's a lot more likely for me to say yes to something if number one, like it's interesting, the project is interesting content-wise to me. Number two, I feel like I'll be able to give my creative input, or that my input as an artist will be valued, and I can kind of work together with the commissioner or the art director or whoever's in charge of it. And then the other factors, I mean, obviously, like the fees are a factor, so it has to be at least fair wages. Because that's part of the bigger discussion about wages, right? If you keep on saying yes to things that are underpriced, that doesn't help the rest of the industry either.
Yeah, because then everybody gets used to nickel and dime art jobs and they don't want to pay artists what they're worth. It's
Yeah,
it's
and I think in
awful.
the beginning, it's definitely difficult to say no because you're always worried about, am I gonna never get opportunities again? But what I found is that the more I say, or the more I kind of trust that I can turn down things and I'll still get work. Actually, the better jobs I get,
Yeah.
because when you kind of, maybe it's just self-respect, right? If you respect yourself more, then you tend to attract people who also respect you. Whereas if you're always taking on jobs where like the conditions are not great, the pay isn't great, for some reason that's like a magnet, and you're just gonna attract more of the same.
Yeah, exactly. Because if I imagine part of it is because if a customer is utilizing your services at a very low price, they will be likely to just tell their friends, who will most likely want to pay the same, if not less, or so the word spreads about your wages, and the same kind of clients keep on coming. It's like a restaurant. If a restaurant is expensive and the food is really good, a lot of people don't go there by default because it's not for them, which is fine. The restaurant's customer base, what they want, the target is not everybody, is a specific slice of the community that they have around them. So it's the same with art. So if you price them accordingly, only certain people will go there because it's not for everybody. And I think that's very wise. Thanks for sharing that.
I think that also brings up the whole thing of like a lot of jobs you will end up getting because of word of mouth. Like not necessarily. It's a lot harder, for a stranger to see your work online and be like, okay, I want to work with this person. Most of the time, either someone has told them about you, or like they've worked with you before, or they've heard about how you work with other people. And depending on what niche of illustration you're in, sometimes that's more important. So I've done a lot of work for like local non-profits that work on social issues or like culture issues. And because like a lot of those people I've met during my own non-profit work, so they know like, okay, this is an artist who already understands the issues and like will be able to kind of approach it in a respectful way. So they're a lot more likely to kind of go to you compared to another person that they just saw on the internet, but they have no idea whether this person is going to be able to handle like this particular topic.
Yeah. So true. Okay, before we wrap up, any parting words to our audience? Any advice? Anything you'd like to say?
I mean, I think this is also driven by what I've been seeing on Twitter for the past week. Like, there's been a lot of art discourse there. So it would be, don't worry about taking the long path. There is no hurry to become an artist, like, however you want to define it. There's no kind of pressure to be a proper artist before a certain age, because everyone's path is different, and like whatever choices you make, like you can make the best out of it. Because sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I had just gone into art straight out of university, started earlier. Maybe I could be a lot better now with all those extra years of training. But at the same time, like without having gone through all those other experiences, I would not be able to make the kind of art I make now.
Exactly.
So at the same time, yeah.
I love this. Yep. I love it.
I wonder, what are your interests outside of art? And how could you bring them into your art making? Please let us know in the comment section of the post associated with this episode at etchrlab.com/Charis. That's etchrlab.com/CH8RIS. Like the podcast? Help us support the show by subscribing and giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts at etchrlab.com/go/Apple. See you in the next episode, and until then, let's make more art.